Okay, this is just a quick plug video to show my Hyva testing environment, which allows you to layer your own site on top of the Hyva test. So there's a set of base tests that goes into Hyva. If we look at the Hyva, and we've got tests over here, so there'll be a set of base tests. And you don't want to have to recreate or copy these tests into your app. So this app has got a different set of tests, but I can layer my app on top of Hyva and run the Hyva based tests against my app. This way it allows these tests to be extended, adjusted without interfering with your own tests, and allows for a community-driven set of tests. So to show you that in practice, now the reason why I'm plugging this again is that I've added the ability to do the same with checkouts. Hyva doesn't do checkout, well, the base Hyva doesn't do checkout unless you have Hyva checkout or React checkout or Luma checkout, and you don't want to put the checkout tests within your app or even within Hyva, because I really see them as separate apps, and they are separate entities because you can swap your checkout out to something else. And if you have all those checkout tests mixed in within your app, it makes the whole maintenance and just dealing with it a bit messy. So you can now layer checkouts on top of your app, which then layers on top of Hyva. So checkout, PPS, Hyva, and they can share tests back and forth. Like for example, in the Luma checkout, I can pull in products, for example, the simple product page from the Hyva app, and I can then make tests that can easily add products to the cart without having to go write all that test code again, because you've already written that to add products to the cart to test cart functionality. So this will then pull in functionality from Hyva, run the page, go to the product page, and do the necessary add to cart, etc. That will be demoed in a moment. So just to circle back to how this all fits together, let me show you a practical run with a visual representation of the information, and we'll start with, so I need to just change into my app. No, not that. Paste. So this is a command that will run. That command is not generally run by hand, but because I want a UI, I will do that. But that sits within your package.json. You would generally use commands like that, or you would use commands like this to run. These are the commands. So you would basically just run test dev, and it will run the necessary commands to effect the tests. And in this case, okay, so I'm diverging again, or digressing again. Let's get back to running the test. So I'm telling it that the app is Hyva, the test base is Hyva, so it's going to run the app Hyva on top of Hyva, which doesn't make sense, but it's the same thing. And you will see that I get a set of tests. These are the tests in the Hyva app, and they will run against my local Hyva install as configured within the Hyva website. If I go there and I look at the config, those are the URLs that it will use because it's looking at this app. And you can see that it's running those tests. Now these tests don't exist within the PPS app. So if I go to the test here, they're not here. Those tests are, these are different tests, but it extends on the car tests. Okay, so if I now change that URL or the command, and I tell it that my app is PPS, I'll get exactly the same set of tests. They're still running out of the Hyva test folder because I told it the base is Hyva, but I'm running on the PPS apps configuration. The end effect is that you will get the same tests but running against your custom site. So you don't have to rewrite the tests, and you don't have to copy them into your folder and edit them, and then somebody makes changes to them and commits them to the base repo, and then you have to bring them over, and there's merge conflicts, and all that has now gone away because you don't have to edit the base Hyva functionality tests. If the base Hyva functionality works in your site and you haven't altered it because you've just got a theme change, all the elements are still the same, you can use those Hyva tests. However, you might want to, you do have functionality that's been changed. So let's, for example, go to my PPS site, and here you will see I've got a bunch of skip tests. Now these are the tests that exist, like for example filters. Filters is a good example. Filters exist within the Hyva site, so it's got its tests here, and it's got its category tests, and it's got filters. So this test will now get skipped. It's done through that command over there in the before each, because I have custom way of how filters work in my site. So there's the PPS filters. Okay, so to show you the effect of that is that when I am running the PPS site, let me just get back to there. I am on PPS using the Hyva, yeah. If I now go to, for example, to filters category, you'll see the filters are there, but it's been skipped. It will not run those filters. And because I've got the tests on Hyva, there is no filters here to run, but that's because I'm skipping. I've told the system to skip filters on the base Hyva. Now to make that work, because I want to run my Hyva tests, I would swap this now to test base of PPS, and you'll see that all the tests will change, and these are the custom tests that are run for this site, and they will be custom. So the site uses Elastic Suite to do its filtering, and there all the filters have worked through. So you could also have, for example, there's a shipping estimate isolated. Now that's also cart actions with one item. Clear the cart. You can override functionality. So if you skip a test, like for example, it can sort products, whatever, and you have that same test named in your overlay, it will use yours in place of the one from the base. This way you can selectively disable base Hyva tests, because you will have your own version of those tests within your test environment that is geared specifically for your site because of structural changes that you've made. I hope that makes sense. Now in the same way, it is now possible then to do the Luma or the checkouts, and I have got the checkouts based onto PPS site. So to give you that example and commands, we can, for example, now go and make the app Luma checkout. Test base. And you will get the tests from that app. And because of the way I've structured it, that will now run its tests against the site that it's configured. This doesn't really use test. The reason why I did both those the same is because it doesn't really layer itself on top of either of these. You'll see its configuration is which site you want it to go to, and there is a private that I'm not going to open that brings you the admin logins and the URL to use. That's actually not relevant here, so ignore what I just said there. And this way you can do tests on checkout, but you can still use functionality from the two or your base websites. As in, for example, I'm pulling in the simple products from the Hyva site because I want to be able to add products to my cart to checkout, but I don't have to go and rewrite all that code to be able to do a checkout, because I can just use where is the test? I can just use the simple product page, add to cart, which is here, which exists under Hyva. So that functionality already exists as part of the test. So you can just pull all that in for any functionality. If your checkout test requires you to register a customer, for example, to check out with, you can pull in the customer test and create the account, lock the person in, and then continue with your checkout. So it still uses the base tests and makes it easier and faster or more rapid to get to the functionality of being able to do checkout tests. And if you suddenly swap out your checkout, then you can just change the app and put in a different app here for Hyva checkout, and you don't have to lose this functionality or this checkout in case you have to go back to it for whatever reason. Anyways, that's my rambling. I hope it makes sense, and ask questions if you have.